So again, good afternoon. My name is Craig Humphrey. I'm a behavior analyst, board certified behavior analyst. I've been at Hope for about 24 years. Prior to being at Hope, I was in the behavioral health department where I carried a caseload of kids with autism and developmental disabilities, and also provided contractual support to public schools in terms of special education, behavior consultation, and training. Today's talk is proactive programming in the home and classroom and everyday life. These are simple proactive strategies to facilitate success and positive behaviors. I really want to thank Leslie and the communications department at Hope for allowing me to present this presentation. It's a lot of high level things, which I found have been very, very effective throughout my years of doing consultation and working with kids with disabilities, and even coaching that. I coach and play hockey, and I use a lot of these strategies with my players and teams. So without further ado, I know we've got a lot of time, or a lot of information, not a lot of time. So today's from 1 o'clock to 1:45. This is a really quick, I say a quick behavioral advertising smorgasbord. It's going to be an overview of some simple positive based support areas. We commonly use these with working with people in learning, all types of learning environments. There's a lot of general information. Some of this may be new, some of this may be a refresher, but I'm hoping you can take something away from it and you can use it in your learning environment. Here's our quick overview, reinforcement reminders and reasons for behavior. I always want to start, we can't really have a talk on behavior without mentioning reinforcement. We'll get into proactive programming in the environment, and then some tools you can use within that environment. And then if time is permitting, we will take some questions. I don't know how easy that will be being virtual, but we can do that through the chat, I believe. So as a reminder, these are, these are general information consultation strategies that provide. They are all positive based. They're all proactive strategies, but any one of these could encompass much more discussion based upon the individual situation, diagnosis, strengths, and deficits. Obviously, when working with individuals with disabilities, we want to have individualized assessment, functional assessment of aberrant behaviors. Those are all key pieces to behavior support and comprehensive treatment plan. So it's sort of just a disclaimer saying that, these are general strategies, but as always, base your interventions and supports on assessment and getting that information before you start working, teaching kids or adults with disabilities. So reinforcement, the backbone of learning. I really like this little slide. It's sort of the dog saying stop yelling, the owner saying stop barking, going back and forth, and also obviously there's some reinforcement going on there that doesn't look like it on the surface, but we'll talk a little bit about that. So reinforcement. The one phrase that I hear all the time, as a coach, as a consultant working at Hope, I want to coach, work with kids, not deal with behavior problems. And that's a common phrase. I've heard it many times in all different types of environments. And I always say, what's wrong with this statement? Well, the problem is that behaviors that you see a person exhibiting, or a player exhibiting, or a young person with autism exhibiting, they can be either good or bad, are being developed and maintained over time. Some type of reinforcement. They are paid off for the individual, and those are the behaviors you see. So you're going to see some good behaviors, you're going to see some bad behaviors. It's sort of hard to tether those out. That's how humans are. They interact with the environment, and their behaviors develop and shift over time. Behavior based, how are these behaviors shaped? Well, an organism interacts with the environment, so that's their behavior. The organism's behavior results in some type of consequence. Those consequences, if they are favorable, meaning they meet the individual's need, that behavior is going to be repeated in the future, and that behavior will increase in frequency or maintain over time. So as long as those consequences meet that individual's need, they're going to maintain over time. So I always say, this is the old adage that a lot of people say, we do what we do because of what happens to us when we do it. That is really the part of reinforcement. We do it because there's behaviors that are paying off. So the functions of behavior, as a result, individuals will learn that their behavior has a payoff and functions in a certain way. Now, keep in mind, that can be good behavior, that can be bad behavior. But for this presentation, the basic reasons or basic functions of behavior are to get something or to make something bad or reversible. Now, I put a little asterisk there. These functions have been simplified. These are by no means the experimental analysis behavior functions that you see in literature. These have been simplified for time and just for comprehension to make things pretty straightforward. Obviously, you go into the literature, they're going to have a lot more discussion about functions behavior, so I wanted to point that out. So reinforcement, the actual definition is anything delivered or removed after behavior response, which causes the frequency of that behavior to increase or maintain in the future. So that's the formalized definition. It can be positive or negative. Positive meaning the stimulus is added after the behavior response, so something was delivered, learned, accessed. Or negative, the stimulus was removed after the behavior response, means something was removed or avoided. Now, the thing about this, positive and negative has nothing to do with the type of stimulus, the type of consequence. It's basically meaning that something was added after the behavior response or something was removed. And this is a common misconception. A lot of people think it's wrong. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I want to point that out. So here's some actual examples. Positive, presenting something after response. So a teacher delivers verbal praise and a small collectible token for a student completing calendar time activities, sitting with nice hands and feet. And if that token is motivating, reinforcing a young man or young lady, sitting nicely increases and continues in the future. When you see that behavior increase, that is termed reinforcement. You look at the behavior. If the behavior increases, it's termed reinforcement. Here's Homer Simpson doing his woohoo dance, some type of positive reinforcement, a little bit of fun there. Negative, removing something aversive after the response. So think escape or avoidance. When using a chainsaw, John puts on sound deadening ear protection to block out the loud noise. Wearing ear protection increases continues in the future. So if you see John putting in his protective earplugs or earphones when he uses the chainsaw in the future, his behavior is increasing. It's blocking out that negative aversive stimulus. When the behavior increases, that's going to be reinforcements, negative reinforcement. And again, you've got Homer here, sort of like he's avoiding something, he does a little few. So again, having a little fun. So here's some other examples, really quick. Positive, you work to get money and buy a new TV. Press on the accelerator to make a car move forward. You tell a joke to get laughter and attention. A student will sign more to get more snack. Or here's one, give a drop of hot jalapeno mustard on the tongue for gross motor imitation training. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later, but in this situation, the young lady was hyposensitive, meaning she took a lot of stimulus for her to taste the food or the condiment. And so she loved hot jalapeno mustard. On the surface, it sounds like that might be, punishment, you're using an aversive or something bad. No, she loved hot jalapeno mustard and would do a lot of gross motor imitation and work tasks to earn hot jalapeno mustard. Negative reinforcement, cold drink to soothe the dry mouth. Wearing sunglasses to get rid of bright light in the eyes. Calling in sick to avoid a meeting with the boss. Going out the back exit at work to avoid running into an annoying coworker. Student bangs his or her head to get out of a loud auditorium environment. So they're doing some behavior to get out of a situation they do not like. I had this same situation back many years when I was teaching the really little bitty guys to ice skate or play hockey. And this one player, every time we worked on I think it was backwards crossovers or backwards skating, really difficult for him. He would come up and he'd say, "Hey coach, my stomach hurts or my head hurts." And he'd go sit on the bench. And then after we're done backwards skating, he's like, "Oh, I'm offline to go." So we picked up on that behavior really quickly and we modified the to make it a little easier for him. So we didn't have to escape that teaching activity on the ice. So reinforcement, like I said, when you use in teaching situations, what it does, it actually communicates the expectations. It communicates that what you just did was correct and what behavior is expected. It actually leads to that chemical changes in the brain. It's the closest thing to clinical brain surgery that we can come without actually opening up the brain. And so we say that it actually forms those synapses, and that's how learning takes place. If I had $1 for every time I hear somebody say, "Oh, we tried reinforcement, it doesn't work," or I don't know why his aggression keeps getting worse and worse, and I keep using timeout and he keeps still throwing material. So each one of these, there is reinforcement going on. Reinforcement is how we all learn. If the behavior is taking place, something is reinforced. So when we try reinforcement, doesn't work, we're probably not identifying the right reinforcement. So we got to do further assessment and figure out what is maintaining the behavior, what's the function of the behavior, and find an appropriate reinforcement. If his aggression is getting worse and worse, something is reinforcing that aggression. Again, we got to find what it is. I've had many people say, "Oh, I use timeout and it just makes things," he keeps throwing materials. Well, probably in this situation, he's probably throwing materials to get out of work. And so what's timeout? You're getting out doing that work. So using timeout is actually reinforcing the bad behavior. Again, these are all just hypothetical, well, actually real life statements, but they're all based upon situations where you have to assess the behavior and determine what needs to be put in place. So functional assessment, looking at the behavior. Just some examples of how reinforcement plays a role in all types of behaviors. So how can we structure the environment, set up the learner and the teacher instructor for success? Support, catch positive behaviors, and use reinforcement to shape and teach behaviors. That answer is what we're going to talk about, proactive program. So proactive program, it's nothing really crazy. It's just using antecedent interventions. Those are things before the behavior occurs, and other proactively structured supports to manipulate the environment prior to the occurrence of behavior. Basically, it's ways to set up the learning environment to be successful, to generate success and to be successful. We use robust schedules of reinforcement, enriched learning environment, and basically use ways to increase the likelihood that the desired behavior will occur, which can be reinforced and minimize the occurrence of inappropriate. So in a nutshell, think of this: ways to help structure the environment for success. Communicate information and expectations. Set up the environment to support teaching and positive behaviors. And lastly, a lot of people don't think about this, but facilitate success for the teacher, coach, educator. Because when the teacher, coach, educator is successful, they're going to be more confident, they're going to be able to teach better, and then in turn helps fuel the positive teaching of whatever task or skill is being worked on in the classroom, on the playing field, at home, et cetera, et cetera. So here's sort of the meat and potatoes of the talk. These are very simple things, they're very straightforward. Some are going to say, well, this is really, I do this already, and that's great. Sometimes they're actually, a little bit more creative, and that's fine too. But these are all things we've used over time and had really, really good success with them. I use it in my everyday life. I use it in coaching. I use it back when I was working with kids with autism here at Hope. So hopefully you can take some of these and you can actually say tools you can use, and we can use them today. So environmental structure, thing about people with autism and disabilities, often you see behavior challenges because they don't understand the environment or what is expected in certain situations. So when you have that unpredictability, when you have that gray area, unpredictability with expectations, schedules, and routines, you get anxiety, you get stress, you get other inappropriate behaviors. So we see kids screaming, crying, physical aggression, tantrums, shutting down. I mean, I can tell you, I've seen kids with autism at the grocery store, and they're just having a meltdown. It could be sensory overload, but a lot of times it's because there's a lot of things in the grocery store which there's a lot of variation, and it may not be the same routine every week. So we can all be playing part into that. But you see a lot of different behaviors because of that. They're not real sure what is to be expected in that environment. So put yourself in their shoes. Imagine for yourself. Each day you come home from work. I don't know my schedule. Do I work again? Do I have the day off? Maybe you work a swing shift, do I have to work at night or have to work a morning shift? When do I go to bed? When do I eat dinner? I don't know when my sports schedule. I mean, I one year I was coaching 2 hockey teams, and I live and die by my phone in the app that I use to keep us scheduled and keep us communicated. And if I didn't have that, I would be like a cat on hot roof. When do we go? Where do we go out of town? When do we leave? I mean, so all those things. How would you feel? Well, you're anxious, you're defensive, on edge, you may be prone, maybe upset, emotional. If you forgot, you missed your game, missed on scheduled event. I mean, there's a lot of different other types of behaviors that you can have when you don't know that expectation and that routine. So how would someone with autism or other disabilities think? Well, put yourself in their shoes. They're going to be even more anxious. They're going to be more upset. You're going to be maybe more defensive. They may wander. They may try and escape the environment because it's a first. There's no set guidance or direction. That's why we often see meltdowns, see tantrums, screaming, physical aggression when the expectations are not. And so in structuring that environment is so very key. And that actually is our first tool. Increasing that environmental structure. Ways we can support kids with autism, adults with autism, kids with developmental disabilities. Any way we can increase the structure in that environment to communicate the expectations, to help communicate what needs to be done, how long the activity is going to be, what the schedule is going to be, can really help support it. So I have visual supports here, and I'm going to mention each one of these specifically in my next couple of slides. But we have carols to break up the environment and reduce stimulation. We have daily schedules and activity schedule. First then boards and first then statements. Sequence strips. Incentive boards or what I am working for boards to communicate that when you do this activity, you can earn some type of reinforcement. Transition cues, statements, timers, structured teaching, instructions and protocols, and communication boards or choice boards. And again, I could tell you all about these, but probably the best thing would be for me to show you. And I actually show a lot of this in my new hire training because we use a lot of these here at Hope, and pictures worth 1,000 words. So here's some actual workspaces. These are visual Carol's work areas, and you can see a lot of the. Here's a nice work area. I know when I was in grad school, I had to go to the library and sit in a work area like that where I couldn't be out in the open. I couldn't be at home. I had to have a Carol to help decrease the sound coming in, help generate my focus towards my study. You see, you've got a work area here which is blocked off and be one-on-one teaching. So you've got the Carol that just decrease distractions. Here's where a chair should be down in the lower left. That helps prompt or cue the young man or lady to sit in this area by using that visual on the carpet, and over time that can be faded or made thinner, or eventually get to the point where it's not needed, and so forth. Here's a carpet square, which you can do some circle time activities or movie time activities, but just simple little things to help cue, support that behavior of working one-on-one or working in a group, and help that stimulation. Here's visual schedules. Visual. We use a lot of visual. We use a lot of pictures. Sometimes we use digital camera pictures. Sometimes we use board maker pictures, which are sort of these cartoon icons. Here's bottom right. You've got an object and picture schedule, which it sort of depends on the individual. You do some assessments as to what works best. But here I can see first I eat, then I wash my face, then I brush my teeth, then I comb my hair. Or this middle one, first I brush my teeth, then I get my vitamins. Either way, you can see what the expectation is going to be for that activity. It can be a visual, it can be object-based, it can be a combination, it can be a full day, a half day, or it can be actually be specific activities. This next slide, actually, the bottom right shows my therapy schedule. So a young man goes out to pull out therapy, and they may be using a visual schedule to show the activity, the order of activities within that physical therapy or occupational therapy session. You can see the written schedule for staff also helps keep them on task. That was for our summer school a couple of years ago. And then another schedule at the top right. A lot of visuals just to help structure that environment and keep people close. Sequence strips are another way using visuals. This is sort of sequencing out the steps to a specific activity. I can see the steps for washing my hands. I turn on the water. I use the soap. I wash my hands, turn off the water in dry hands. And you can see I actually have that in one of our bath restrooms here. They can be vertical, they can be horizontal, but again, the nice thing about this is that you as a teacher can point to the picture, and the picture sort of does the teaching, and you can sort of fade yourself. I'm sitting there talking all the time and walking through the steps and talking to as part of the teaching process. That makes me part of the teaching process, and fading myself from that can be very, very challenging. So pictures, they can be made bigger, smaller, they can be faded, and you can point to them. Just a way to help structure a specific activity. Incentive and token boards. I know I mentioned this earlier. These are really, really nice because I can see right here, I can select whatever activity I'm working, what activity I'm doing, and what I'm working for. So I'm doing my activity, I go through the activity, I earn my 5 stars, and then I get nothing. Or I've got my Thomas the Train, I've got 4 token puzzle pieces. As I go through that activity, I earn my puzzle piece, my token piece. When I get all 4, I have time with Thomas the Train. Just another way to visually show progress through the activity and what you're going to earn. And it's very, very concrete. A lot of times the student can pick what they're working for, and then got some variety. You can do the activity, they earn the stars, I see they're doing well, you pair with verbal praise, and then boom. And so timers and feedback. Anybody who knows has a little one running around, time is very abstract. Any way we can structure those activities to show how much time is remaining. That top left is a time timer. The red is basically the amount of time that's left. As the time decreases, the red sort of goes away. When the red is all done, the activity is over. We have that on a watch. We use normal visual egg timers, like the bottom right, just a digital timer. And then you see you've got color ones. So green is, more than 10 minutes remaining, yellow is 1 to 10 minutes remaining, and red means the activity is coming to an end. Similar times of feedback, that upper right is a Yapper tracker, which communicates how loud a classroom is. So if you're working on quiet work, or you want to teach kids to, monitor their own sounds and the amount of talking, green means it's appropriate level, yellow means it's getting a little louder, and red means it's way too loud. So anything you can do to give feedback to in regards to specific behaviors, visually, especially visually, it's going to be really, really effective. And again, depends on the types of learners you're working with and what their processing skills are. Some of these will be a little bit more appropriate than others, but that's where that individualizes. Structure teaching or giving instructions. I mean, this is another way you can see we use pictures to show how to do an assembly task. We've got a workstation or work system here where you've got bin 1, bin 2, bin 3. You pull the bin out, you do the bin, do the activity in the bin, then you put it in the all done bin or right. Then you move to number 2 and number 3. That's set up also at the top right. We got a to-do folder and a finish folder. So I actually used something like this when I was going to junior high. I'd have my homework and my finish. And I know it sounds a little simple, but it helped me going through 5, 6, 7 different classes, what I need to do, by each subject to do, and then I'll finish and then to return forward. So we use these in everyday life. It's just a way of structuring that environment, making sure that the teaching steps are outlined, and it helps give more guidance and structure to help support positive behaviors in learning. Choice boards, communication boards. I know we use for some of our kids that have maybe some mood, they're on some medication for depression, or they're using feedback to tell the therapist how they feel. This bottom right, how does Kelly feel? We would do this several times per shift, and they can, give feedback as to I'm happy, I'm tired, I'm hurting, I'm scared. How do you feel? I mean, we actually track this in some of our kids, we have data on this and how it's self-reporting. So we use that with psychiatrists. Requesting, I need a hug, I need tickles, I need, ways to communicate. These are pictures that can take the place of voice. It's augmented, sort of like augmented communication, but these are just really, really simple strategies you can use. Sometimes kids are so upset that they can't communicate they can't process. But you can proactively go up to them and say, "Oh, okay, we're in this new environment, and I can see you're upset. How do you feel?" And we teach them to use this, and they'll say, "I feel sad, I feel mad, I feel bored, I feel hot, I'm tired," and so on. But again, visuals normally process very, very well, and help facilitate communication and teaching. So the other piece of this is that, like I said, I just mentioned this. People with autism are generally very good visual processing, that more so than auditory processing. Some of our kids could have up to 15 to 20-second delay in auditory processing. And so that's one reason why we use those pictures. Visual learners in a very auditory world. You think about the world we live in, it's very auditory. And so we have someone who's a visual learner using these supports can really help support them and help maintain and support their behavior and learning. I've heard this saying, play is work and work is play, and I want to just really touch on that really quick. A lot of times when you work with kids with autism, the work situation is very structured. And there's a first, you do this, then first, next, then last. But I remember going into the classroom and it's free time, it's playtime, and this young man with autism was just melting down. There was no set guidance or direction. So he was just like, what do I do? And so then in that case, we actually had a schedule for playtime or free time. So just because it's playtime and free time doesn't mean the structure goes on. Number 2, catch and being. Often we take things away, not necessarily me, but people often take things away as discipline for inappropriate behaviors. That doesn't necessarily communicate what is expected. We talked about reinforcement. It's clinical brain surgery. It helps communicate what the expectations are. Anybody who knows me, this is a huge phrase I use, catch and being good. It's part of my teaching, my coaching repertoire. Catch and being good. And so the best way to deal with inappropriate behaviors is to be proactively reinforce kids at such a high rate of reinforcement that the probability of misbehaviors. Increasing the reinforcement during high demand tasks minimize the potential that we want to escape, and then reinforcement upon doing the activity further communicates the expectation of it anyway. So catch and being good. I've heard this 1,000 times. We shouldn't have to use edibles, stickers, soda to reinforce joy. Or marriage should just behave naturally. or I don't believe in bribing kids to behave. And there's, I, it's a, these are, there's a lot of things that are just not right about this. And I want to make sure we clarify this, it's okay to reinforce appropriate behavior. It's easier to use frequent reinforcement to catch them being good than to repeatedly deal with inappropriate behaviors. And I use the 6-to-1 rule. That basically means for every one redirection should have at least 6 positive catch good phrases. So I'm out there on the ice, I'm using reinforcement, I'm using verbal praise, I'm using high fives, really high rates of reinforcement, communicate that the kids are doing, because hockey, learning how to skate is a hard art. Learning how to skate is hard itself, let alone playing hockey. And so you want to catch those behaviors, and shape those behaviors. And remember, punishment only tells a person what not to do. So lots of reinforcement, 6-to-1 rule. And those are things which the more you do it becomes more naturally. And we actually some of our CQA data, we actually look at teacher interactions with their kids in classes, and we actually look at positive phrase statements and generate a ratio of good to bad, or catch good versus catch bad, and we give that as feedback. Ensure success. This is one that is a little bit harder because often tasks will end when a child misbehaves. So Mike is working on programs, he throws a book, the teacher then ends the task or redirects him to a different activity. But what did we just teach Mike? I just learned if I throw a book, I get to go do some things. So it's actually better to end a task early, take a quick break, end task early, good behavior, take a quick break, and then return to finish the task. So break up the task in small components. You could have repeated little mini short segments of the activity. You have several breaks, interdisperse, help them be successful. And then a lot of times that will help maintain them through that activity as compared to try and stretch out a 15 or 20 minute worksheet task, and then they melt down at minute 18. Then you've got inappropriate behavior you got to deal with, and you've got to get calm, and then you got to make sure you don't reinforce escape. A lot of times we'll alternate between high demand and low demand tasks or leisure sensory tasks, which naturally helps support that as well. But basically we're making them into really short segments so that we can sort of do a work break, and help support them. Similar to this, we always have to return the task if an inappropriate behavior takes place. So what does that mean? Well, like the case of the book, Mike threw the book, the teacher took him away from that activity. Actually, you should have had him calm down, come back to one more segment of that activity, and then take a break. You're ending on an appropriate task. We don't want to reinforce escape behavior. And we have had situations where we may do a hand over hand prompt or a touch prompt to help generate that appropriate behavior and then take a break, and that's okay. I'd much rather have a prompted response or a prompted work response and then take a quick break as compared to expecting the kiddo to do it themselves and they have another meltdown, and it leads to sort of a cyclic pattern of melting down and having to wait it out. So it's okay to use a prompt to generate that appropriate work response. And here's an actual example. I think I mentioned this sort of earlier. Mike's doing his academic worksheets. Halfway through, Mike throws his materials on the floor and tries to hit it up here. And you decide to redirect Mike and go out in the hallway one-on-one together for a drink. Well, one-on-one time, going out to the drink, that can be seen as it could be reinforcing, to Mike. And that's something we would not want to do. We want to make sure he comes back, once he's calm, comes back, finishes his worksheets, and then he can take a break with you one-on-one. I actually had a situation at one of the public schools where every time the young man swore, he went down to the principal for counseling. So he got lots of one-on-one attention. He got out of class, and then after counseling with the principal, the secretary would have him pick a treat from the candy bowl that's in the main office. So he was getting lots of one-on-one attention and extra treats for basically swearing. Next school tool is every opportunity is a learning opportunity. So remember, utilize those natural learning opportunities. When you're working, it's snack time, lunchtime, work on requesting behavior, labeling behavior. Use that environment to help support, help teach. Walking around the mall, around the block, driving the car, asking about color, shapes, pointing out animals on the side of the road. There's a lot of different ways you can use every opportunity as a learning opportunity. The other one is I talked about this earlier, work break. This is what we call pre-macking. We're using a high probability behavior, such as a high preferred activity, to reinforce a low probability behavior. And it sounds really complicated, but it's grandma's law. You can have your cake after you finish your keys. You can watch television, high probability behavior, after you finish your homework. I don't like doing homework, it's a low probability behavior. So use that high probability behavior to reinforce the occurrence of a low probability behavior. And that's what grandma always said, you gotta eat your peas and then you can have your cake that's sitting up. So cool. All right, so those are the proactive strategies. Like I say, very, very straightforward. Some of them are pretty simple. Some of you probably use. But then I get these sounds great, but these are the concerns and common excuses we often hear. And some of these are sort of funny and some of these are sort of concerning, but go over these really, really quick. Concern number one, if I had $1 for every time I heard this, I wouldn't have to work for a while. Phil doesn't need visuals. All people with and without disabilities can use visuals. I know I use visuals. They enhance comprehension. You look at your iPhone. What is on the main screen? Those little apps. Those are all visual apps. I mean, they're very pleasing to look at. That's why iPhones are so popular and smartphones are so popular. They're fun to look at. So my example I give in Germany, how can you find the bathroom in the airport? I don't read German. I went over to Germany for my brother's wedding and I didn't know any German, but I used the visuals to help guide me around to where the luggage claim was, where the bathrooms were, etc. And so here's one of my slides I love showing. You can see the various different visuals that are out here. And I always point out this one here in the middle. I don't want to go down there. I see there's detours. I see there's construction. Here's one in the airport. It doesn't matter where that is. It might be somewhere in Asia, but I can see where the bathrooms are. I can see where the handicap or the accessible entrance is. I mean, you can see all these. We all use visuals. The stop signs, you're letting off the accelerator in your car before you even read STOP. You see you see that stop sign and you're actually responding to it before you can read the sign. So we all use visuals. Another real life example, and this is one that really hits home, especially with my coaching colleagues. I'm a very visual person. I actually write on the ice with a marker and it gets the kids' attention. I demonstrate the drill, or I'd actually use my iPad. We've got some software. So here's a written description of the drill. 2 lines in opposite diagonal corners of the ring. Place 8 to 10 cones spaced evenly down each side of the ring. On one side, have the player skate around the cones, keeping the puck in the middle of the cones, stickling up the ice, finish with a shot on goal. The other side, have the player skate straight up the middle of the cones, sticking the puck around the outside of the cones, finish with a shot on goal. I'm like, okay, I'm trying to visualize this in my head. But if I drew this out and showed them, I can show my players, oh, that's what we need. It's a pretty straightforward task. It saves a lot of time. Kids get it. I can give feedback on, as I'm diagramming it or showing it on the iPad or showing it on the ice, what is to be expected. But that visual helps us process. And I can guarantee using visuals with kids, especially in sports, can really save a lot of time and a lot of questions, a lot of errors. So just something to really, really keep in mind. Do not hesitate to use visuals. Concern number 2, John doesn't need a schedule or to-do list. We all use schedules and to-do lists and checklists. With and without, people with disabilities and people without disabilities. It increases that predictability, minimizes anxiety, minimizes errors. How many times would you have forgotten an item at the grocery store? How many times have you forgotten an item in the grocery store? Would this have happened if you had written down a list? Probably not. When I have a list, my shopping trips, they're much more thorough and comprehensive. I get everything I need. When I don't have a list, I forget. I'm going back to the next. Same thing with putting together. You buy some furniture from IKEA or buy some furniture or a model airplane. They use visuals to help you put that piece of furniture together. I mean, I know some of the diagrams aren't the best, but some of the words to describe how to put together an IKEA coffee table, it would take 6, 7, 8, 9 pages. But you've got pictures to help show that. And again, here's some visuals. You got a shopping list. We've got Outlook. This is actually a schedule program on to help schedule field trips. We've got our calendar of events on Outlook. You got your iPhone with the various things. You got the coaching software. And so signs of the times, we all use checklists, we all use lists. It's okay. And that's okay. I live and die by it, the schedules and visuals. Here's some more. You're putting something together, the body of a car, and there's an IKEA. It looks like a bookcase. It's just lots of visuals to help support appropriate completion of behavior in the work. This one I hear a lot too. Using edibles as immediate reinforcer is not right. It's a way of reinforcing the individual to develop and shape specific behavioral responses. Edibles are a primary reinforcer, basically meaning they satisfy biological need. They're normally very motivating. But here's the thing, we got to use what's motivating to the individual. Using things that the parents want, using things that the teacher thinks may or may not work. And if it doesn't work, it's not going to be effective. You've got to use what's motivating to that individual. The jalapeno mustard example up there again, because again, with this young lady, she was hyposensitive to taste and she liked hot, spicy things. And so she would do gross motor activities, worksheet activities, and she would actually get it. We would take a drop of hot jalapeno mustard on tongue depressor, put it on her tongue, and she would just do anything. If you had not known that, and you tried to use an M&M or tried to use something else, she would not have, she would not work for it. She would shut down. Those were not motivated. So part of this is that we'll break this up into small amounts. We don't use a whole bag of chip. We might break a chip up into 30 pieces and give them small amounts after every response and every third response and every fifth response. We combine it with verbal praise and social reinforcement. Over time, we will fade that to other more appropriate reinforcers that can be made. But when we first start out teaching, using edibles, small edibles very frequently is a really good way to generate that behavior, to shape that behavior and facilitate teaching. Number 4, we shouldn't have to bribe John to behave. You know, using reinforcers of strength behavior is not bribery. We are using a contingency. If you do X systematic, it's based upon a schedule. It's based upon how complexity of the task, how functioning level of the kiddo. We lead to those, you know, we use frequent reinforcement to lead to those chemical changes, new neural connections in the brain. And again, we will favor it over time, but we're not giving a chip and saying do something. They're doing X. We are reinforcing by delivering Y, combining with verbal praise, and over time we can make that behavior basically fade the edible, use our verbal praise, token reinforcers. We can pats in the back, high fives, a lot of different types of reinforcers. I always say, what's our reinforcer? Would you work for free? People say that's different. It's different. Means a reinforcer. It's what makes the world around. And working for free, I know we love our jobs, but we have bills to pay and things we buy, so it's probably won't sustain very much. And concern number 5, we don't have to. I mean, this is the one that's sort of, you don't really see it till you start looking at it. You know, you're so close to it. Parents and teachers, coaches sometimes say they're so busy with their schedule, other students, they don't have time to implement some of it. But they don't realize the amount of reactive time that they are already spending on redirecting inappropriate behaviors or on things that don't. And so what I always say, pick a, you know, and I've done this with families. I say, pick a time in the day, you know, a 90-minute duration, 60-minute duration that you can implement something consistent, a visual schedule, a checklist, something, you know, we did this with a family. I said, they would get home from school, and that transition time from getting off the bus to homework time was a mess, chaotic time. So we made a visual schedule. You come home, you put your book bag up, you wash your hands, you get a snack, you complete your snack, you get a little bit of reinforcer time, video game time, and then we work or something like that. You do that implementation consistently for 2 weeks and evaluate the progress. And I would say 9 out of 10 parents I work with, they would say, wow, that was so simple and it made such a huge difference. Dad knew what the expectation was, mom knew what the expectation was, the kiddo knew what the expectation was. And after you got through that initial teaching part, you know, it was automatic. And so implementation, starting small and then gradually extending into longer and longer durations, good way to start. So in summary, like I say, this has been a really high level overview of a lot of information, short amount of time, but there's very effective strategies. Remember, behaviors, they take place for some reason. This is the abbreviated version. It's not in the literature. To get something, to make something go away. Understanding these can help you determine specific interventions in context, but again, you want to assess the situation and help with determining programming and types of interventions. Remember, increase that environmental structure, maximize predictability. Incorporating robust schedules of reinforcement and opportunities for reinforcement to proactively condition the environment to be positive and ensure success. Making your environment really reinforced makes you a big M&M. And I say that sort of, you know, not everybody likes M&Ms, but you know, if you make, most kids like M&Ms, make yourself, make your classroom, make your playing field, your coaching environment, make yourself a big M&M so kids want to. You've got lots of reinforcement, you're going to start providing lots of reinforcement. You want to make that a conditioned, a positive environment. And when you do that, you're going to see fewer behaviors in terms of wanting to escape the environment and overall have greater success in terms of teaching and supporting. So here's some references. These all basically lots of references in terms of behavior analysis. There's some other types of things, so giving feedback in terms of timers. Some other websites which are really good that can help support you as well. And I think that brings us pretty close to the 45-minute time frame, even with our little technical difficulty at the beginning. So I thank you. I don't know if anybody has any questions. There's my contact information. You can also reach out to the communications department here at Hope. I believe this has been recorded. It's going to go into a teacher portal, and you can watch it at your leisure. But I know everyone's got a busy schedule, so I will let you guys go. And again, thank you for your time. I really appreciate you signing up for this talk.